Hope you're doing well. We made it to another Friday, y'all. Oh my God, what a week. So many weeks back to back to back to back, right? But we made it to another Friday. We want to begin where we always begin, and that's with what's happening in Gaza. We should breathe a sigh of relief, at least for now. There has been an agreement for a 72-hour ceasefire. Israel has agreed to pull back the IDF to designated lines, agreement to release hostages and prisoners. We should start seeing that, at least according to announcements, as early as Monday or Tuesday. This is just the first step in an elaborate, quote-unquote, peace plan. I put it in inverted commas because until we address the underlying issues that were inaugurated in 1948, we are going to have some serious issues in the region. But here we have an opportunity. And, oftentimes we want to rush to declare success, but we know this is a volatile situation. This is just the first step. Benjamin Netanyahu has his political realities. Hamas has its political realities and aims and ends. We know that the Likud party, the coalition that has allowed Benjamin Netanyahu to hold on to the reins of power, that his far right flank have already made it known that they are not in agreement with this plan. So we need to be careful in overstating what has been achieved, particularly in the effort to celebrate Donald Trump's ability to make a deal. We know that he was lauding the process and the deal as an effort to kind of lobby the Nobel Peace Prize Committee to give him the Nobel. Thank God they didn't do it. It would have emptied, to my mind, the Nobel Peace Prize of any meaning. But we know that he's going to make his way to the Middle East in order to claim, ownership, claim responsibility for what he takes and these folk take to be unprecedented in many ways. It is. But we also know it's an attempt to continue to box Netanyahu in. If there's one thing that Donald Trump has done, he has held Netanyahu to his feet to the fire. At least that's what it's perceived to be. We don't know what the end is here. We know that the U.S. is sending 200 troops to help and secure Israel in this process. I don't know what that means in its detail, particularly in light of Trump's comments back in the day that America was going to take possession of the Gaza Strip, that it could become this extraordinary resort property. You remember all of that? I mean, we tend to forget it in this moment. But, outside of all of the particulars, what we are excited about and what we're breathing a sigh of relief about is the end of the horror for the moment, the cessation of the violence. We need to understand that well over 65,000 plus Palestinians have been killed. We also must understand the devastating impact of this genocide on children, innocent children, in the Strip, in the territory, as it were. We need to understand that this is a military response so far, but we still have the humanitarian crisis. I mean, we have to ask ourselves, if there's a ceasefire, if there's a broad peace plan, what will Palestinians in the Gaza Strip be returning to? Well, we know that 9 out of 10 homes have been destroyed, that the infrastructure has been basically destroyed. We know that there's going to have to be a monumental effort at nation building. And, whenever I hear certain kinds of conversations around this, it just reeks of 19th century colonialism to me. But there has to be a concerted effort. Israel has agreed to allow a flood of humanitarian aid to come into the Strip. It has to scale up to the scale of the devastation almost immediately. And so no matter what we think about the politics of this plan, no matter what we think about its possibilities, the one thing we must celebrate is that the bombs, at least for now, have stopped. Our primary concern is that the death, the killing stops, and at least allow for an opening, but not only the cessation of war, but the possibility of peace and freedom for this region, for the Palestinian people, right, and the like. So let's keep our eyes on this. Let's be mindful and deeply skeptical. Cultivate the pessimism of intellect. with regards to all of the declarations about this being historic. We know what Netanyahu and the Likud party has done before. They shall we say, almost immediately undermine the possibility of these peace talks. And we have to understand Hamas as an actor in this as well, and what they do and what they have done over the years. So let's keep our eye on this. We're all in the midst of a government shutdown. It doesn't look like it's going to end anytime soon. There was a recent moment on C-SPAN where Mike Johnson was confronted by a wife of a military personnel, and she held him to the fire. And the fact that military folk won't get paid, we see this. We see the effects of the shutdown with regards to airports and the like, with massive delays across the country. We know that there's a pending crisis as SNAP and WIC will not be providing benefits or resources for families who desperately need them. And we know that 1 in 4 young people in the United States, 1 in 4 children, right, need or utilize a WIC. So the hurt is beginning to be felt. The pressure is beginning to be felt. And there's a sense in which Senator John Thune, his basic strategy is that he doesn't think the Democrats have a threshold for pain, that they will fold. But what we do know, what we see, is that Republicans are losing the argument. They are losing the argument. They are losing the argument. And part of that has to do with the way in which the argument around health care, right, touches their districts, right? That is to say, people who live in red states will be impacted. They are already being impacted by rising premiums. They're going to be impacted by the closing of rural hospitals. They're going to be impacted by the fact that many will be thrown off healthcare rolls, that they will see the shrinking of Medicaid and Medicare. We have tangible evidence that they are being impacted. When you have Marjorie Taylor Greene sounding reasonable in this regard, you know they are in trouble. Just listen to Marjorie Taylor Greene.
I'm one of those that gets real tired of political drama when it's not actually solving a problem. And this is such a crisis that I'm willing to say, okay, everyone, we have to do something about this. We track all the calls that come into my office. About 60% of the calls coming in right now are calls of support and saying, yes, health insurance is a crisis. They're telling us stories about how they're already paying $2,000 a month with $10,000 deductibles. I'm getting phone calls from people that are saying if the ACA tax credits expire, they aren't going to be able to have health insurance. They're going to have to drop it. But I'm hearing from people on both sides, people already on the ACA and people that are already getting crushed by high health insurance premiums.
They are in deep trouble, y'all. We all are. This is bizarro world, right? Marjorie Taylor Greene sounds reasonable in this regard. She's just simply speaking to her constituency here. And I think it's important for Democrats to hold the line. And it's important for I think, mainstream media to ask the question, not in this way, whether or not Democrats will join the Democrats who signed on to the continuing resolution, but whether or not Republicans will actually respond to the crisis around American health care, right? Will they address the subsidies of the ACA? Will they fund American health? I think that's the question that needs to be asked. Not whether or not Democrats will join the what was it, 3 or so Democrats who signed on to the continuing resolution. They need to be asking the Republicans hard questions about their positions on health care. So we know that the shutdown is going to touch all of Americans, all of us. We know that the rise in insurance premiums are going to affect not only the most vulnerable, but the American middle class. Right? It's going to affect the upper middle class in interesting sorts of ways. Right? So, but it's important that the Democratic Party hold the line here. It's important that they hold the line. We shall see what happens. We shall see who blinks. And we hear Donald Trump and MAGA and the bravado about cutting quote unquote Democrat policies, about firing folk, right? At the end of the day, they're going to have to face their constituencies. They're going to have to face the fact that they are willing to gut the health care of everyday ordinary Americans because they want to give tax breaks to billionaires. And this is the question we have to ask ourselves repeatedly. What are the values animating these policy positions? What is the vision of the country that these people have that shapes and forms their policy initiatives? And I think when we begin to interrogate that, we see that they will exploit, grievances and fears and the like, but they're doing it on behalf of the billionaire class that in so many ways has captured, right, American government in so many ways. Remember, I've always said that there's a toxic brew of what? Greed, selfishness, and hatred that has the nation by the throat. A toxic brew that is literally poisoning the system of the country, it seems to me, constricting its throat. I want to get my metaphors clear here, right? So we need to see, and we're seeing in real time the way those values of MAGA, right, shape the policy positions of those persons in the House and Senate, and of course, Donald Trump. So we are still in the government shutdown, and we have to say to the Democrats, hold the line, hold the line, hold the line. Well, and speaking of hold the line, we see the protest in Chicago and Portland. Just look at this. Look at what's going on.
Trump! No KKK! No racist USA!
No Trump! No ICE on truth!
No Trump! No ICE on truth!
Chicago wins in licking boots!
Chicago is in the kingdom!
We're not going to just lay down and let them just trample over us. Let's drown them out. Man, them
Peaceful, trying to challenge the presence of ICE in Chicago, right? Peaceful, their descriptions of Portland as this hellscape.
Kristi Noem went on the roof of the ICE building to survey the scene.
President Trump will end the radical left's reign of terror in Portland once and for all.
You look at Portland and you see fires all over the place. You see fights and, just violence.
This network of Antifa is just as sophisticated as MS-13, as TDA, as ISIS, as Hezbollah, as Hamas, as all of them. They are just as dangerous. They have an agenda to destroy us, just like the other terrorists we've dealt with for many, many years.
When ICE officers have to street battle against Antifa, hand-to-hand combat every night to come and go from their building.
slide to the left. Slide to the right. Crisscross.
You look at what's happened with Portland over the years. It's a burning hellhole.
They're doing the cha-cha-cha slide and the like, electric slide and whatnot in Portland, drawing on ridicule and nonviolent protest as a way to call attention to the absurdity of the deployment of ICE and the National Guard in American cities. A judge has ordered a 14-day restraining order on the deployment of the National Guard in places like Chicago and across the country. Says in some ways it's a violation of the 10th and 14th Amendment. We also see that another judge at the same time, right, blocked federal agents from using force for 14 days, such as pulling or shoving a person to the ground, tackling or body slamming individuals. We saw the callous heart of an ICE agent, top of a building, shooting a Presbyterian minister in the head with a pepper bullet who was engaged in nonviolent protest. This is the face of fascism. Now, these people will say, don't call it that. They don't want to be called what they are. Right? They don't want to be held to account for the policies and positions that they hold. So when you do call them what they are, at least what their actions suggest they are, they clutch their pearls to say that that is the source of violence, right? Right? It's an old game. It's an old game that we can trace back to the founding in so many ways. It's an old game that I know intimately, at least from those who were battling against slavery and those who were battling against Jim Crow, that the fault is yours, not the fault of the folk who are actually engaging in the horrific behavior. So Chicago and Portland remain a battlefield. They remain sites, Memphis too, where Donald Trump has overreached in terms of his executive power, right? Remains important, right? As evidence of the lawlessness of the Trump administration. Did you hear Stephen Miller justifying, what the Trump administration is doing in American cities? Did you hear it? Well, if you haven't listened to it.
You've called the district judge's ruling blocking the deployment of National Guard in Oregon legal insurrection. Does the administration still plan to abide by that ruling?
Well, the administration filed an appeal this morning with the Ninth Circuit. I would note the administration won an identical case in the Ninth Circuit just a few months ago with respect to the federalizing of the California National Guard. Under Title 10 of the U.S. Code, the president has plenary authority.
Stephen?
He believes that Donald Trump has absolute authority in a particular area, in these particular areas. He said plenary power, and then he paused because he realized as some people have said that he said the quiet part out loud. But he believes that the president has complete power over the particular areas without limitation. That's what plenary authority means, without limitation. The man thinks he's a dictator. He thinks he's a king. And he has these folks around him who completely agree with it, who completely agree with what he's doing, right? In the name of what? In the name of what? I've said over and over again that what ICE is doing, it's the largest federal law enforcement agency we have now after the big, beautiful bill, quote unquote. What is ICE? What is the mandate for ICE? To make America white again. To make America white again. They're parked outside of schools. They're in communities like Cicero, taking people off the streets who are just simply trying to go get food for dinner. People who've been here for decades. And they're saying that they're going after the hardened criminals. They're lying. They lie through their teeth over and over again. Over and over again. We see it with regards to the government shutdown, lying. And we see it with regards to the deployment of the military and ICE and other border agents in places like Chicago and Portland and Memphis. Now, mind you, these law enforcement folk aren't getting paid. These military folk aren't getting paid because of what Republicans are doing, right? Can you imagine these National Guard folk who have been activated, who haven't to leave their jobs, right, aren't getting paid because of the government shutdown? Come on, y'all. Come on. We have to see these folk for who they are. So, look, it's important for us to understand that the nonviolent resistance in Portland and in Chicago, that it's important. It's critical. Remember, I've been saying over and over again that what we have to do as a society is to refuse our consent, to deny it. To deny our consent to what they're trying to do. In one way, that's what the Democratic Party is doing with regards to the government shutdown. They're refusing to consent, right, to the policy agenda, the Project 2025 agenda of the Trump administration that will devastate, right, the health care of millions of Americans. It's not just simply military folk, that woman who called Speaker Johnson on C-SPAN. It's not just military families who are suffering. If people will suffer across the board if the Democratic Party falls. Right? So we have to refuse our consent so that the protests that we're witnessing in Chicago and Portland, this is important. We have to figure out how to scale it up nationally, but this is important. We have to refuse our consent to this. We have to say no. We have to say no, and the form of that no will vary. It will vary in the forms of ridicule, because they can't stand it, because they're all insecure. It can take the form of ridicule, and Spike, that meme of the inflatable frog is just hilarious to me. Right. It can take that form. It can take the form of wildcat boycotts. It could take the form, right, of a general strike. Whatever we need to do over the next 4 years, right, to save this democracy, it begins with our refusal. We must not lend, or how shall we put it, give our consent to these folk. Remember, government is consent of the governed. We must refuse it. Now, of course, just yesterday, they've already indicted Comey. They wanted to put him on the perp walk. Somebody had to get fired because they refused to perp walk, James Comey. And now we get the indictment of Letitia James, the Attorney General of the state of New York. And, in so many ways, we've been talking about red lines. They've crossed so many red lines. But, no president, to my mind, has ever dared to cross this one before. The Wall Street Journal reported that Truth Social post was supposed to be a direct message to Pam Bondi. Trump has an enemies list. It's clear. And he's going after them. Comey, Letitia James, those two have already been indicted. Adam Schiff, lawyer up, because they're coming your way soon, right? In so many ways, the effort post-Watergate to separate the Department of Justice from the office of the presidency, that line is gone. Donald Trump is clearly weaponizing the DOJ to punish Letitia James. And we know why, right? President publicly called her scum, a total crook. He was indicted and convicted for millions of dollars. This indictment, what is little under 19,000, could be a clerical error, a paperwork error, right? Letitia James says she's clear that the indictment, that the claims are baseless. Look at her response.
This is nothing more than a continuation of the president's desperate weaponization of our justice system. He is forcing federal law enforcement agencies to do his bidding, all because I did my job as the New York State Attorney General. These charges are baseless, and the president's own public statements make clear that his only goal is political retribution at any cost. The president's actions are a grave violation of our constitutional order and have drawn sharp criticism from members of both parties. I stand strongly behind my office's litigation against the Trump Organization. Judges have upheld the trial court's finding that Donald Trump, his company, and his 2 sons are liable for fraud. I'm a proud woman of faith, and I know that faith and fear cannot share the same space. And so today, I'm not fearful. I'm fearless. And as my faith teaches me, no weapon formed against me shall prosper. We will fight these baseless charges aggressively, and my office will continue to fiercely protect New Yorkers and their rights. And I will continue to do my job.
She says the facts are and the law are on her side. She's clear. No weapon formed against me shall prosper. She will continue to do her job. In effect, she said, bring it on. And remember, Governor Pritzker said that too when he said we wanted to jail him and Mayor Brandon Johnson. Come on, bring your folk. Come get me. That's what he said. That's what we have to refuse our consent and then challenge the bully. To not be afraid, but not to be naive about the scope of the power of the executive branch, but not to be afraid to the point to where we're running away and sticking our heads in the sand. Letitia James isn't doing this. She's ready for it. Let's go. Let's go. She understands that Trump is corrupting justice. She understands that he is literally throwing any commitment to the rule of law out the window. Right? Look at who he installed as the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia. Former police officer and longtime prosecutor of violent crime and terrorism cases was pushed out. Why? Right? Because came to a conclusion that there was nothing to charge here, that they couldn't bring charges, that this wasn't right, right? So he has installed an insurance lawyer. Guys, come on. And these folk talk to us about merit. They come at us and talk about that we're DEI hires. All this mediocrity all over the place. In the name of what? Breaking laws all over the place, flouting the rule of law, and they want to talk to us about standards and merit and the like? You know? And the interesting thing about, this indictment of Letitia James and Comey is that, there's bipartisan criticism. There's bipartisan criticism, right? Across the board, folk are saying this is overreach. This is a waste of taxpayer dollars and the like. Trump, right, thinks of himself as a dictator. Stephen Miller said the quiet part out loud. He thinks he has absolute authority without limitation. We must refuse. We must refuse our consent. We're here. We're here. The government is shut down. He's still doing what he's doing. At every level, all the trains are still running. We have to refuse our consent over and over again.